Tens of thousands of Kaiser Permanente healthcare workers across the nation are walking out. The strike of about 75,000 workers began today in California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. In August, unions for the Kaiser workers requested wages of $25 per hour, with 7% increases each year for the first 2 years, followed by 6.25% increases each year for the next 2 years, according to the Associated Press.
Kaiser Permanente has 39 hospitals nationwide, administrators health insurance for about 13 million people, and reported $2.1 billion in net income in the second quarter of this year, according to the AP. Michelle Gaskill-Hames, an executive for Kaiser, said the company's compensation, among other features like retention and practices, is superior to others. So I bet it is superior to others.
Well, this is fascinating because there's been this broader crisis across the industry, especially since COVID, of a kind of an employment crisis. There are not enough workers who are willing to do this job. So if you recall, during the pandemic, these were all of our first-line healthcare workers. These were our heroes who we were leaning out at 8 p.m. to bang pots and pans in celebration of. And some of the people that have been interviewed by the press and covering this event have been talking about how they never took a day off during the pandemic, how hard the work was. This isn't doctors and nurses, generally speaking, who are represented by different unions. These are the people who clean and sanitize surgical rooms, who take care of some of the grittiest, hardest part of delivering healthcare, delivering medical care. But because the work is so grueling and because pay has not kept up anywhere near the rate of inflation, if minimum wage had kept up with productivity, according to a 2021 report, it would be $24 an hour. They're asking for $25 an hour for one of the hardest jobs that I think exists in the American workforce. And in response, Kaiser has moved somewhat. They said that they would raise minimum pay to between $21 and $23 an hour. So it already seems like the leverage is working somewhat. But they're looking for the full 25.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bri, I can't blame them. I mean, you described the work to me, and I wouldn't do that for less than probably $24, $25. I mean, look, we've talked about this a lot on this program, and I oftentimes read the comments, and because I'm always curious to see what everyday people are thinking, people who are out there busting their butts to take care of themselves and their families, and people are working hard. And what I'm finding, Bree, even on this show, when I look at what our viewers are saying, Republicans and Democrats alike are tired of working so hard and barely making it. They look at what's going on in Washington, D.C., which we saw yesterday, and this craziness. You look at wealthy individuals, and they're gaining more. The politicians obviously don't appear to care. They're more concerned about the individuals who give to them. And people are saying, what about me? We're giving hundreds of billions to Ukraine. We're letting hundreds of thousands into the country. And then you have corporations making a lot of money, and people are working 40 hours a week, and if they're doing overtime, maybe 60 hours a week, to still barely be able to afford rent, to still barely to be able to afford groceries. And if you do have a car, you're lucky if you can frickin' pay gas prices. And if you live in California, you're probably paying about $5 for gas. And so you look at the culmination of all of these things, Bree, and I think this is one thing that could actually bring left-leaning and right-leaning people together to say, look, we may disagree on a whole lot of things, but we're kind of all getting screwed here.
I think we're very much seeing that. I mean, some of the testimonials that have been included in the reporting of the people who've been working in this environment, they really point out that it is negatively affecting the healthcare they're able to provide when they're not sufficiently staffed. So you have fewer people doing more work, and without subsequent increases in compensation. A couple of people who were interviewed, Nisha Eakins, 32, and her wife, Olu Watson Eakins, they're both pharmacists who were on the picket line. They pointed out that staff shortages mean more stress and taking on longer hours, sometimes working alone while patients wait longer and have their calls go unanswered. This is from the Washington Post, Lauren Gurley reporting, quote, it impacts employee health, physical, mental, but it also impacts patient care. You can't give the best to members when you yourself are struggling just to hold on. And I think that's in real contrast to some of the framing that we've seen in some of these legacy media outlets. The New York Times reporting opens with a description that this could affect, could cause, quote, delays for patients, especially in California. I think hoping, well, I don't want to cast aspersions, but I do think that kind of framing can make readers less likely to identify with how their interests are with the workers, including for their own care, and instead say, oh, I'm going to be inconvenienced. I don't want to side with these workers.
Yeah, I mean, it's marketing 101 here. I mean, if you see that headline, and most people will see that on social media, not click on it, they will say, well, what the heck are these guys doing when they should be taking care of people?
Yeah.
That's going to be the knee-jerk reaction. So casting aspersions or not, you may not. I'm going to cast aspersions. The New York Times, they know darn well what they're doing with those headlines. And they're wrong, because the American people want to stand on the side of workers. They do, because most of the American people are hard-working people. The idea of the middle class, at least what it once was 50 years ago, is non-existent, Bree, and it is only getting worse. I mean, you talk about student loan debt. You talk about this idea everyone should go to college and get a degree or get a skill.
By the way, I don't say that. I don't think everyone should go to college.
Not you, but I
think everyone who wants to.
But I'm saying, Bree, the idea of doing all of these things right to partake into the American dream is just not realistic for a lot of Americans.
Sure.
And so if you want to level the playing field, if you do want people to be able to have the sort of equity that they once could acquire 50, 60 years ago, you have to pay, what's the song? Pay me what you owe me.
Yeah.
If you're going to work me like a dog, at least give me a good, decent wage.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that in the UAW example, the big three car manufacturers have been making the case crying poor, that they can't possibly afford the wage increases that the workers have been agitating for. I think Shawn Fain, the head of the UAW, has been really compelling and pointing out exactly what the profit margins are pointing out that you could double the salaries of all of these workers and the company could still be making a profit. I'm sure we're going to see some more of that discourse come out in this instance, but just as a gloss, it's worth noting that Kaiser Permanente had a very profitable year with $2.1 billion in profit, and that the CEO, Gregory Adams, made $15,562,000 last year.
And so that probably doesn't even include whatever stock options, because most CEOs, they have a layered compensation package. So you're going to have a guaranteed income. Then you're going to have stock options. I mean, there's a couple of different things, Bree. So it may potentially be even more than that. And when people look at this kind of stuff, no one's hating on wealthy people. When you look at Pew Research, Pew did a survey, I think a year or two ago, and most Americans want to be wealthy. This idea of accumulating wealth, people say, oh, wow, this is an exciting possibility if you're a hardworking person. But they also don't want to see regular hardworking people suffering at the result of people getting money.
Yeah.
There's some incongruence there. And so if you're a CEO making $15 million or $30 million and you say, well, look, we can't pay you more because the company's going to get bankrupt, but keep giving me the $15 million, people are like, well, maybe you should take a pay cut then. But these people aren't willing to do that. I've always held this position. I know we got to get ready to wrap here, guys. I'm all about capitalism, and Bree knows this very well. We talk about it often on this show. But I am not, as someone who's doing well, willing to continue to do well while watching people suffer. Bree, there's something moral about that, at least for Shermichael Singleton, that I am just not okay with. We got to take care of the people who allow you to make the $15 million a year.
Yeah, I do think that's why it was so correct of the people in the Bernie movement to constantly raise some structural differences that have changed between the 1950s and 60s and now with respect to the gaps between CEO pay and worker pay.
You said 400%, right, Bree?
There is a zero-sum game. No one wants to hate on rich people, but there is a direct relationship between how we have so many more uber-wealthy people today. We minted how many new billionaires in the pandemic? What was 200 new billionaires in the middle of a pandemic when everyone else was suffering? There's a relationship between mass suffering and people getting really rich. And when you have, in the 1960s, the average gap between CEO pay and worker pay being 30 to 1, and now it's nearing 400 to 1. It's like high 300s to 1. Those are policy choices. Those are structural choices. Those are choices that are being made in Washington about the tax structure that the wealthy corporations are under and the incentive structures that these boards are choosing to follow.
Bree, do you think,
and now workers are striking back.
Do you think what we're seeing today is sort of the precipice of something good to come? Do you think that people of every ethnic background, every political stripe, are saying, yeah, we have differences. Yeah, we may not like each other on certain things, but man, we're all getting the short end of the stick on this. Maybe we need to all come together and demand more. Do you think we're there, or do you think these individuals are ultimately going to win? Because they set the rules here.
I hope to God we're there. And I hope the wave of labor action that we're seeing across the country is evidence of that, because if people stand together and realize their shared solidaristic interests as workers, that they comprise 99% of the country, despite having only a tiny sliver of wealth. Remember, the top 1% of earners of the wealthiest have 50% of American wealth. We are the ones that have the majority of the vote. We are the ones that are struggling together. The 99%, there is a lot of diversity financially in there. There are people who are making $200,000 a year, and there's people who are making $30,000 a year. But the proximity of interest between them and the guy who's making $1 billion a year or millions of dollars a year is exponentially more. And so, yes, this is a real demonstration of the power that happens when people really do stand together, and they won't be divided because of race, gender, sexuality,
politics,
whether or not they like the beer that was sold by the trans person. If they can keep focused and not be distracted by those issues that are literally ginned up by the media to keep people from being focused on how much they can gain by standing together, then they can accomplish.
I think you're right. Orchestrated division. They're doing a good job at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for us today. We sadly won't be seeing Shermichael back at the desk tomorrow. My goodness. I can't even keep it straight. But please do return. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's been a real pleasure.
See you later, guys. I'm going to miss you, Bree.
I'm going to miss you too, Shermichael. Take care.
Take care, guys.